When we think about American history, our minds usually jump to 1492, right? But what if that starting point misses thousands of years of the real story? In this explainer, we're going to dig into what the Americas were actually like way before any European ships even hit the horizon. So let's start with the big question, the one that changes everything. What did the Americas really look like in the year 1491? It's time to toss out those old textbook images and movie myths. What was the actual reality on the ground? For the longest time, the picture we were all given was this: a huge, empty, untamed forest. A wilderness, basically, with maybe a few small groups of people wandering through. But, as we're about to see, that picture isn't just a little bit off. It's completely and totally wrong. Okay, so first things first. Let's just dismantle the biggest part of that myth right away, the whole idea of an empty land. To do that, we have to talk about cities. Yeah, you heard that right, cities, long before Columbus ever showed up. The truth is, the Americas were absolutely bustling with people. For thousands of years, people here built large, permanent settlements, towns, and even these incredible monumental cities. This wasn't some world of temporary campsites. We're talking about a world of homes, public plazas, and communities that lasted for generations. And the sheer depth of this history is, well, it's staggering. I mean, we're talking about people first arriving here over 20,000 years ago. And get this, by 2200 BCE, that's right around the time the Great Pyramids were being finished in Egypt, people in what we now call Louisiana were building the massive city of Poverty Point. This history is just as ancient, just as deep as anywhere else on Earth. All right, so we've established there were big cities. Check. But what were these societies actually like? Well, as it turns out, this was a world of absolutely incredible and sophisticated innovation. And if you want a perfect example of this genius, look no further than an agricultural method known as the Three Sisters. This wasn't just planting seeds in the ground. Oh no, this was a brilliant, integrated system that was crazy productive and completely sustainable. It is so clever. Here's how it works. First, you've got the maize, or corn, which grows tall and acts as a natural trellis for the beanstalks to climb up. Then you have the beans, and this is the amazing part. They pull nitrogen from the air and put it back into the soil, basically fertilizing everything around them. And finally, the squash plants spread out their big leaves across the ground, which blocks weeds and keeps the soil moist. It's like a perfect little self-sustaining ecosystem that you can eat. But it wasn't just about farming, not by a long shot. Up in the Pacific Northwest, you had these incredibly complex societies built entirely around fishing. Out on the Great Plains, whole economies were centered on the bison. And tying all these different groups together were these vast, continent-spanning trade networks moving goods and ideas for thousands of miles. Now, all this economic diversity, it was supported by equally complex social and political systems. So let's talk about nations and networks, because that old idea of small, simple, isolated tribes, it just completely falls apart when you look at the evidence. And there was no one-size-fits-all approach here. In some places, you had huge confederacies like the Haudenosaunee, a really sophisticated alliance of independent nations that made decisions by consensus. And then elsewhere, you had massive centralized empires like the Aztec and the Inca, with powerful emperors, huge armies, and complex bureaucracies. These weren't primitive structures. They were advanced political models, each designed for a different purpose. Okay, so let's recap. We have ancient cities, unbelievable innovation, and complex nations. And all of this is leading us to the single biggest revelation of all, the one that just completely shatters that myth of an empty wilderness. And that is the sheer number of people who were here. So I want you to just take a second and really think about it. Based on everything we've just covered, what's your best guess? How many people actually called the Americas home right before Columbus arrived? Brace yourself for this one. The high-end estimates from scholars suggest the population of the Americas in 1491 could have been as high as 100 million people. Just let that number sink in for a moment. That's very likely more people than were living in all of Europe at the same time. This was not an empty land. It was one of the most populated places on the entire planet. Now look, to be fair, scholars definitely debate the exact number. You'll see estimates that range from a lower end of about 8 million all the way up to that 100 million figure. But here's the key takeaway. It doesn't really matter which estimate you use. Even the most conservative number proves that this was a hemisphere that was widely settled and absolutely thriving. This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. The story of the Americas before 1492 isn't a story of emptiness. It's a story of thousands upon thousands of years of complex, diverse, and thriving civilizations. So we'll just leave you with this final thought. If the Americas weren't some new world waiting to be discovered, but a very old world full of millions of people, cities, and nations, if the story of this place doesn't start in 1492, but tens of thousands of years earlier, well, how does that change everything we think we know about the history that came after?